continue, shall we? But before we continue, let us maybe recap a little bit. So the two previous videos, part one and part two of what is life coaching, I covered briefly the history of life coaching. I didn't cover everything, of course, that is not the point usually. The point is to just give you enough so that you understand something, overview of it. I also covered the kind of life coaching that I do, which I refer to it as psychospiritual life coaching or psychospiritual work. I explained what it covers. So if you've missed part one and part two, which is basically just part one because it was about life coaching, but because I spoke for long, I divided them into two parts. So if you have not watched part one and part two, maybe you want to start there if you want. So today, I want to cover what clinical therapy is and what is counseling, what the difference are. Because, we live in a place where we confuse the two, we think it's the same thing, and it's not the same thing. And I know psychologists, registered psychologists, clinical psychologists get really, really irritated with the life coaching gang. I want to own it. We do frustrate them a little bit because sometimes we define things the way they shouldn't be defined. And I think it's important to honor people's work, especially people who have gone to school for this for years and years. And we want to honor what they do and how it differs to the work that some of us do. And counseling is also just misunderstood. So let's break it down for you. Let's start with clinical psychology or clinical therapy. What is it? What does it entail? What does it focus on? Who is the patient stroke client of a therapist? So I'm going to be looking at my notes so that I am, I'm accurate and I don't go off a tangent unnecessarily. So if you see my eyes looking down, that's because I'm looking at my notes here on my Word document. Okay, let's begin. So clinical therapy. So that is your psychologist, your psychiatrist who has studied long-term, gone to varsity, have a degree for it. They do clinical therapy. Now, what does it focus on? It treats diagnosable mental health disorder. So we are talking depression, anxiety, severe anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder, bipolar, schizophrenia, and all things in that category. Others lately also add things like ADHD. They get categorized into this, or they get put into this category, but it's all of those things that are debatable because sometimes they're like, no, ADHD and the likes need to be counseled rather. Yeah, it is just a very interesting world. But just so that you know, if you struggle with depression, with anxiety, real anxiety, not worried about a presentation tomorrow, but anxiety as part of your life, where you get panic attacks, where you get deep social anxiety, if you have post-traumatic stress disorder, if you have bipolar, if you have schizophrenia, if you have maybe even long-term, things like sexual trauma, sexual trauma, like perhaps you were molested as a child or you were raped and so on, that will fall under PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. The practitioners, like I said, it is your clinical psychologist, psychiatrist, or other licensed therapist with advanced training. The approach usually includes psychological assessments, diagnostic tools, evidence-based intervention like CBT. CBT stands for cognitive behavioral therapy, or DBT, which is dialectical behavioral therapy, or medical medication management. You find people who struggle with anxiety or depression being put on medication. So, the psychologist, psychiatrist, especially psychiatrists, will medicate them to get the things in their mental health balanced. Okay, so the setting is often in hospitals, in mental health clinics, or even in private practices, so where you go and you see your psychologist or your therapy and you go for therapy. The depth, it can be very long term. I know of people who've been seeing a therapist for over 2 years for their issues, and I'm talking weekly or bi-weekly visits for over 2 years. It can be very intense. It can be a year, but it's usually a long-term type of thing. It's not like coaching where we speak of 8 sessions or 12 sessions, or, and so on. With therapy, with clinical therapy, with disorders like depression and anxiety, as I've mentioned, you do not know how long it can be. It can take years and years and years. It can take months and months and sometimes maybe 2 years. Like I say, I know of someone who's been in therapy for about 2 years. It's someone I work with as well in conjunction with a therapist. So yes, you can see a therapist for your PTSD stuff and for your depression, and then come to someone like me for other things, like if there is a specific obstacle that you want to get over or something that you want to achieve or some different tools that are not like the therapist tools. For an example, if you are medicated, you may want to have a life coach like me or Kagiso or some other life coach that you know that can help you with other things. So it does get, we don't work against each other, we work with each other. So a life coach can work alone, provided that the client does not have the mentioned, does not struggle with depression or chronic anxiety. A life coach can help a person. Now, counseling. Let's get to counseling. Counseling. So counseling is my favorite one, and a lot of life coaches use counseling in their practices, and clinical therapists also use counseling depending on what the issue is. So it can be very, these things meet somewhere and they differ somewhere, but counseling is the widely used methodology or modality, rather. I want to say modality. So what does it focus on? Its main focus is emotional well-being, is to support a client, a patient with emotional well-being. For an example, we will support you through life transition. Let's say you just lost your job, you were retrenched, you need emotional support, you need someone to hold your hand, you have just gotten divorced, you have just gotten fired, you've just lost something precious to you, maybe you're an entrepreneur, you've just gone bankrupt. I needed counseling when I went bankrupt with my first business, but I didn't know that. But I did go to therapy. I did go to therapy and I was counseled there. There's an example of going to therapy, not because I have depression or anxiety or those mental health issues, but I needed emotional support for what I have just gone through. So if you're grieving, if you have relationship issues, you have a particular pattern in your relationships that is taking you nowhere. You keep attracting cheaters. You keep attracting people who take from you. You keep trauma bonding. You have a weird pattern. We can support you emotionally while helping you get over that or let that thing go. Counseling also helps people with stress. It helps people with small a anxiety. Small a anxiety, I mean, like I made an example in the previous videos. You're about to give a big presentation, you're about to address a big meeting, you're about to have an honest conversation with someone that you are scared of or that's in authority. That anxiety, we help you through it before you go for that big meeting. I do that a lot with my clients. And we also help you with personal growth, emotional well-being as you are growing personal, when you are in your journey of personal growth. Practitioners, who are the practitioners who do counseling? So you get counselors themselves, someone who's trained to be a counselor, which are what? Your social workers, therapists themselves, life coaches themselves do counseling. So usually it's talk therapy. So we really talk. I mean, a big part of my work is talk therapy. You speak through things. I give you modalities. I make you do things, make you do rituals. Like I said in the previous video, please do watch that one. But these practitioners are not necessarily clinical. So meaning I don't need to be licensed. I don't have to be a licensed clinical therapist to do counseling. Okay. Training, do I need training? Yes, you do need some training, a little bit to understand methodologies, to know, when to not cross certain boundaries and so on. It does get a bit technical. Okay. The approach is very relational, it's very conversational, unlike in therapy, in clinical therapy, where it's not conversation. You're not having a conversation with your therapist. You are speaking. You've seen it in TV. Generally, you are the one talking, and they are busy writing, and they are just checking certain things. There's a way that they know how to diagnose you and to give you the right medication. So with counseling, it's very conversational and it's very relational. We use a lot of human. It's very human based. It's person to person. It's very narrative driven. I tell a lot of stories. I share a lot of scenarios. I share a lot of stories when I am in session with my clients. Um, it is also very solution focused. Do you see now that if you go to therapy because you have depression, it can't be solution focused. It has to be around helping you manage your mental health and getting on top of it, not necessarily getting a particular solution for this specific thing or getting to a particular goal. I hope I'm making sense. Okay. The setup or the setting for counseling, you'll find counselors at schools. I mean, there's always a counselor at school. I hope they have them where there's a counselor's office. If a child is behaving some type of way, they see a counselor. In community centers, communities would have where people can go for counseling. I think in certain districts. And then you get private practices like your coaches or your social workers who have their own private practices. And then you also find it in wellness offices, wellness spaces. I know corporate South Africa has wellness things now, and there's a wellness desk or a wellness office that is usually linked to HR, and kudos to them for that. I just wish corporate South Africa can do a little bit more than just lip service or just making people do blood tests and high blood pressure and check stress levels. If they could just deepen that role. And I promise you, if corporate South Africa does that, productivity will improve because people need help. People need to be heard. People need to vent about their situations, their marriage, their financial situations, instead of just putting you on giving you someone who can help you with a budget. Can you get them a money coach that can help them understand their money issues from the bottom, from home, what was the dynamic at home with money? How did mama handle money? How did daddy handle money? How did that affect you? How did it impact your body, your nervous system, and so on? That's what people need, dear corporate South Africa. Okay. And then the depth of, or the length or depth of counseling, it's usually short to medium term. So you're talking 8 sessions with a counselor, 8 sessions with a life coach, 8 sessions with a therapy that does counseling, or 12 or 6 months, but it's not like therapy. So it's usually your short term to medium focused on a specific issue, but then you find that that one issue will lead to this one and that one and that one. And ultimately you become a well-rounded person, having received a lot of help from counseling. So I'm sure you can tell that it is my favorite. I love counseling. I really do. And I do a lot of it in my sessions while helping you with a whole lot of other things and giving you tools. A tool, for an example, what is a tool? A tool would be, you would have a particular trigger. Let's say you get triggered by something all the time. A tool would be a way of responding instead of responding the same way. Let's say, if I can give a practical example, let's say you get triggered by people who write about gender-based violence, or, people on social media like to write about, their abusive partners or whatever. And every time you read that, you get triggered because you had that issue. A tool would then be a way of responding such that the trigger does not take you all the way to your problems again. It doesn't take you back to your situations. It helps you just take a deep breath. Like a tool would be like maybe take three deep breaths and count to 10 or something like that. And I'm giving you a very, very basic thing, but there are many, many tools that we give clients to help them with their situations. Okay. The goal is emotional support, clarity, coping strategies, as I said, the tools, and deep, deep personal insights or self-awareness. If there's one thing that I always make sure that my clients, when they no longer come to me, when they are on their own now and they're equipped with tools, one of the biggest tools that I make sure they have is the ability to be self-aware, the ability to be self-conscious, the ability to see when, I'm projecting, these are my issues, and when it's not their issues. So yeah, that is what counseling is versus what therapy is. I hope this was helpful, and I'm happy to take questions because, with things like this, it becomes very important for you to ask questions, and then we can take it further. I also wanted to say that I will be running my own coaching course, which it will be the second year. I did a coaching course, meaning training someone to become a coach using my method. I did it in 2024 and we skipped 2025 because there was quite a lot going on in my work. So 2026, if you're interested in becoming a life coach, please do join my Patreon or simply just send me an email. I will then send you the details of that. I will see you next time with another teaching. And this, my friends, is my story. I cannot wait to hear yours.